What is up, everyone? I hope you're having a good day, staying safe and healthy at home. In order to sort of ease the boredom a little bit, I thought I'd come up with a list of films that you might want to watch, that might kind of keep you occupied and you might enjoy. Some of these films are quite popular and well known, so you probably have already seen some or most of them, but I think they would also make for some really good rewatches as well, especially during this time. I know a lot of people have already made these kinds of videos. A lot of my favorite YouTubers certainly have, and I thought that I'd try to approach it from a slightly different way. So what I've done is I've sort of split this list into a few different categories. 20 films that take place in one or, a limited amount of locations, so you can really feel that sense of isolation or that sense of entrapment from your own home, or in some cases watch these people go through some pretty terrible stuff while you're kind of sitting in the comfort of your own home. And then we've got 20 films that take place outdoors, so these sort of epic adventures, and then you've got 5 films that are sort of these wild cards that kind of exist in between, that I think would make for some really, really good rewatches as well. And then, of course, within these categories are, films from different places in time, older films, newer films, stuff that you might have seen, stuff that you might not have seen, stuff that you might have always wanted to watch but has been too long and too intimidating to watch until now. But I will say, though, the one thing that I've excluded are foreign films, because I've just done a whole video about my favorite Asian films, so a lot of those films kind of would have carried over to this one. So I'm just gonna, this will be strictly English language films made in Hollywood, basically. But before we start, something that you might want to do, that you may not have had the time or the willpower to do back, when the world was normal, is to kind of go back and binge a lot of these long epic sagas. Maybe you could want to watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy, extended edition. Maybe you want to do the Avengers films, the Marvel films. Maybe you want to do Harry Potter. Maybe you want to do Star Wars. Maybe you want to do Bond to lead up to No Time to Die. Or just go back and binge a series that you really like. I recently watched all 7.5 seasons of Game of Thrones. A video about that will be coming soon to coincide with the sort of 1-year anniversary of season 8 being over. But yeah, so maybe you guys want to do that, and I think it would make for some really interesting experiences. But anyway, let's start with the first category, which are films that take place in one or limited locations. We've got Ex Machina, which is a brilliant sci-fi film. I'm sure most of you have already seen it. Alex Garland's directorial debut. Brilliant debut. Brilliant performances. Donald Gleeson, Oscar Isaac, and Alicia Vikander, who in my opinion should have won her Oscar for this, not Danish Girl, but that's just my opinion. Brilliant cinematography, and it has a very relaxed feel to it. For a film that's quite dense in subject matter and very heavy and, stuff goes down, a large chunk of the film, I think, moves at this very sort of chilled out pace. It's not in a rush to go anywhere, and I really like when a film has that kind of audacity. The same thing can be said with High Life by Claire Denis. It came out last year with Robert Pattinson, a brilliant performance by him. And I think in a way this film was sort of overshadowed by the likes of The Lighthouse or Ad Astra, and I think in many ways it is basically The Lighthouse meets Ad Astra. It's this brilliant sort of self-contained sci-fi film with a very unique approach, and I think it's something that not a lot of people have seen, and I think deserves more recognition. Bad Times at the El Royale, in my opinion, one of the most underrated films of 2018, has a great ensemble cast, beautiful cinematography, an absolutely brilliant soundtrack. I think it's one of those films that's really able to capture the period that it's set in while also having a bit of a modern touch. It feels equally nostalgic and contemporary at the same time. The writing's great, the mystery's great, and also you've got this brilliant breakout performance by Cynthia Erivo, who I think, I still maintain, should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actress for this film. She was absolutely mesmerizing. Panic Room, probably Fincher's least well-known film. It's brilliant. Jodie Foster's in it. You've got a young Kristen Stewart, Forrest Whitaker. You've got Jared Leto. A great cast. And I would say that out of all of Fincher's films, this is probably like the easiest watch. You know, it's not that long, it's not that heavy, and it's a good film that you can watch, and it's, you know, it's 2 hours well spent. But it's not Zodiac, it's not Fight Club, it's not The Social Network. It's fun to watch with multiple people, and, you know, it's thrilling. It works as a thriller very, very well, in my opinion. Now, these next 4 films, or even 5 films actually, you could watch as a great sort of quadruple or quintuple feature. Those films being The Hateful Eight, The Thing, The Shining, Misery, and Die Hard. All absolute masterpieces, in my opinion. I think The Hateful Eight is mid-tier Tarantino, but it has some of his best moments. And I think The Hateful Eight and The Thing would be a brilliant double feature. Because obviously you've got Ennio Morricone being the composer on both films, and obviously Tarantino has said that John Carpenter's original The Thing was a huge influence on The Hateful Eight, and both are brilliant. And also these 4 films with The Shining and Misery as well all take place in like snowy areas. Obviously The Shining, if you haven't seen it, please do. In my opinion, it's the greatest horror film ever made. It's my favorite Stanley Kubrick film, and it has some of my all-time favorite movie moments. One of my favorite endings in a film. Absolute masterpiece. And if you want as well, check out Dr. Sleep, another really underrated film that kind of flew under the radar. Misery is another Stephen King adaptation by Rob Reiner, who is going to come back in this list. I think Rob Reiner back in his, you know, when he was in his prime, was making masterpiece after masterpiece after masterpiece. And this one just has some of the best performances you will ever see. James Caan, Kathy Bates, absolutely brilliant. Just truly awesome. Obviously, Die Hard, another classic, something that I think you'll have a great time watching at home. It's just brilliant. You know, Bruce Willis, amazing. Alan Rickman, amazing. The direction by John McTiernan, the sense of claustrophobia that he creates while also having this sort of non-stop breakneck action pace, absolutely terrific. Now we're going to kind of take a bit of a turn in terms of these more self-contained films, and I'm going to recommend some films that I think are a little bit more relaxed and aren't as maybe intense. And those films, you've got Her, which is one of the great love stories of modern films. My favorite Joaquin Phoenix performance. If you've seen Joker but haven't seen Her, watch Her. Phantom Thread, another film that is very unconventionally done, but I also think it is one of my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson films, one of the best Daniel Day-Lewis performances, and also, again, has a very sort of surprisingly relaxed pace. I think it moves very confidently, and it's not in a rush to get anywhere. Now, these next 2 films would also work brilliantly as a double feature by 2 different Italian directors. You've got A Bigger Splash by Luca Guadagnino, who did, of course, Call Me By Your Name and the recent Suspiria, both great films. This is one of his more underrated films that not a lot of people have seen. I was going to recommend Call Me By Your Name, but I feel like this is kind of should be watched as well. It has a very similar kind of atmosphere and a very similar pace to Call Me By Your Name. Again, it's not in a rush to go anywhere. It feels like a great hangout movie. You know, it's definitely much more character focused than story focused. The same with the next film that I'm going to talk about. You've also got one of the best Ralph Fiennes performances. Very unlike most Ralph Fiennes performances. I feel like when you watch this, you'll see Ralph Fiennes in a completely different way. And the other film is Youth by Paolo Sorrentino. Youth has one of Michael Caine's best performances, one of Harvey Keitel's best performances. And it's a very unique film with a very unique approach as well in the filmmaking. Paolo Sorrentino has always fascinated me as a filmmaker, and his choices here from cinematography, score, music, also casting, because you've got Paul Dano in the film and he plays a very un-Paul Dano character. And I think it's one of those films that in the hands of any other director would have been quite generic and quite boring and quite pretentious, but Youth feels very likable and very endearing, and that's one of the film's greatest qualities. Next up is Only Lovers Left Alive. Now, this is a film by Jim Jarmusch. It stars Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston. You've probably heard about this before, but it's the one where they play vampires. Again, it's a great film about isolation and the passage of time and sort of immortality, which is exactly how I'm sure a lot of us feel right now. Me, Earl and the Dying Girl is up next, a very underrated film that flew under the radar for a lot of people. The direction has so much more dynamism than it has any right to be. You know, this is sort of a high school drama / comedy, and it's directed so well. The blocking, the camera work is actually ridiculous. It's directed by a guy called Alfonso Gomez-Rejon, who also did the Current War film with Benedict Cumberbatch, and I feel like in terms of the cinematography, he went way too overboard with that. Like, I don't think there was a single shot in that film where the camera didn't move. But here I think it's very measured. And it's actually shot by Chung Hoon Chung, who did Old Boy. So I think that says a lot about the direction and the style of this film. Now for some animated films, we've got Fantastic Mr. Fox, which is my favorite Wes Anderson film, one of my all-time favorite animated films. Brilliant humor, brilliant writing, gorgeous stop-motion cinematography. The Red Turtle, which is just brilliant visual storytelling. It's a silent film, there's no talking, there's no dialogue. Again, I think it's one of those films that's really perfect for the time that we're living in right now, and I think you'll definitely relate to it a lot and learn a lot from this film. It's beautifully done. Now, in this category, I'm going to finish with three classic films. We've got 12 Angry Men, a film that literally takes place in one room. One of the greatest, if not the greatest, dialogue-driven film of all time. Sidney Lumet, just a master. If you haven't seen 12 Angry Men, I think it's one of those films that you just need to watch just so you can say you've watched 12 Angry Men. We've got Sunset Boulevard, which is my favorite film from Billy Wilder. It's so inspirational to me as a filmmaker, but also incredibly fun and entertaining to watch as an audience member. In my opinion, definitely one of the best LA films. Just so good. The writing, the directing, the performances are out of this world. And the final one that I'd like to recommend in the sort of self-contained, set in a few location categories, is Rope. It's not that long, I believe it's only about an hour and 20, so it'll be a quick watch. It's set in one location, in one room, and it's done basically all in one take. And I feel like the reason a lot of people have heard about Rope recently is because in those How They Did 1917 in one take videos, they would reference Rope a lot. And I think Rope is one of Hitchcock's most underrated films. The story, the themes, the characters, all very well done. And I learn a lot from it. And I think Rope is, well, I kind of structured this video very intentionally. So Rope is a brilliant segue into the next category, which starts off with 1917, also a one-take film. I haven't really gotten a chance to talk about it on my channel, and I loved the film. I think it would have been in the top 10, maybe like top 7, top 5 of my 2019 films. I love Sam Mendes, I love Roger Deakins. It's so good, so cinematic, and I think it's one of those films where there are so many moments that remind me why I love films. You know, there are a lot of these movie magic moments. So if you haven't seen 1917, or if you have and you want to rewatch it, I think it's a brilliant adventure film. We've got The Lost City of Zed up next, which is directed by James Gray, who did Ad Astra. And in a way, this is sort of like the opposite of Ad Astra, because where Ad Astra is a sci-fi film that looks to the future, this is a period piece that looks to the past. It's about the exploration of the Amazon, and it's brilliant. I think the cinematography is gorgeous. It's shot by Darius Khondji, who's one of my favorite cinematographers. I will say though that my slight issue with it is, from what I've heard, the film originally was actually meant to be like 4 hours, and this cut I think is about 2 hours and 20. And I would love to have actually watched the 4-hour cut, because there were a lot of scenes where you can tell should have gone much longer and would have been much more important had it been seen within the context of the 4-hour cut. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting film for sure. Next up is Silence, one of Martin Scorsese's more underrated films. Possibly, maybe, the best performance by Andrew Garfield. Adam Driver's in it as well, he's brilliant. Also, actually, yeah, speaking of Scorsese, I wasn't planning on saying this, but watch Taxi Driver. Watch Taxi Driver. If you haven't seen Taxi Driver, in fact, if you've seen Joker and think it's like really original and stuff, and you haven't seen Taxi Driver, do us all a favor and watch Taxi Driver. But yeah, no, Silence is brilliant. Some of the best... Actually, you know what? I will say it. I think it's Scorsese's best looking film. I think his collaboration with Rodrigo Prieto here is truly outstanding, and it is gorgeous. And it definitely has a very old school style to it with minimal camera work. Definitely not like most Scorsese films. It's very patient, and it's a hard watch. It's heavy. But I think you'll come out feeling a lot and learning a lot. Okay, next up is Kubo and the Two Strings, to lighten the mood a little bit. Brilliant adventure. It'll definitely make you long for the outdoors and want to go on an adventure and start traveling, so maybe don't watch this film. It's got one of the best voice casts. Brilliant direction by Travis Knight. Brilliant stop motion work. The animation is truly breathtaking, and I have so much respect and admiration for people who do stop motion. I would never have the time or the patience to do it, but just so much respect. Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, number 4. Specifically, I think it's one of those films that you could really enjoy from home. I've seen it so many times that it has a great rewatchability factor. Into the Wild. Now this, out of all films, is the one that's going to make you want to travel the most. But at the same time, I guess it's going to make you like want to stay home the most because of how it ends. Sean Penn did such a brilliant job directing this. Emile Hirsch, I've said it before, he's such an underrated actor and needs to be in more films. I love this film. The Fall by Tarsem Singh, commonly seen by many as one of the most beautiful films ever made. It's definitely a huge inspiration to me and my filmmaking. I think that, you know, what they were able to capture in terms of the visuals, in terms of the atmosphere, is unreal. And if you're someone who loves watching, you know, aesthetically pleasing films, check this one out. Big Fish is my favorite Tim Burton film. It has maybe one of my favorite Ewan McGregor performances. It's one of those films that basically is the story of a person's entire life, but exists in sort of this heightened reality. It's very Tim Burton. In many ways, it's like the most Tim Burton film Tim Burton's made, and I honestly think it's a masterpiece. I think that it's so beautiful and it's so poignant, and the way that they explore the relationships, especially between Billy Crudup and his father Albert Finney, who's the old version of Ewan McGregor, nearly brought me to tears. To this day, I've still only cried in one film ever, but Big Fish made it close to being two films. Dead Man, another film by Jim Jarmusch, one of Johnny Depp's best performances. Beautiful black and white cinematography, a very, very unconventional Western. If you've seen the film Slow West with Michael Fassbender, you're gonna really like this. Jurassic Park. I really want to rewatch this film now. After I finish uploading this, I'm probably going to rewatch Jurassic Park at some point, because I rewatched Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom recently, and it's so dumb and it's so nonsensical, and it kind of made me want to watch Jurassic Park again, and I think it's a brilliant film. You can watch it, you know, you can watch people get ripped apart by dinosaurs from the comfort of your own home, and you can feel completely safe. The Princess Bride, another Rob Reiner masterpiece. I feel like this is kind of obvious. You've all probably seen it, but definitely rewatch it. If you haven't seen The Princess Bride, it's actually like one of the best fairy tale adventure films you can watch. It's just truly masterful. Badlands. This is the first film by Terrence Malick, and it's also my favorite film by Terrence Malick. A brilliant adventure once again. It's very nostalgic, and it has a very old school classic vibe to it. And again, I just think Terrence Malick, I would love to see him go back to do stuff like this. I really would. You know, more story-centered, more character-focused. Because, I mean, he makes really good films, and I would love to see him go back to doing something more focused and kind of more driven by the narrative. Midnight in Paris, my favorite Woody Allen film. I've talked a little bit about this film before. It's the best nostalgic film, in my opinion. I like it so much more than most people, I think, and honestly, in a time like this, where we wish we could escape, and we wish we could, you know, be outside and be with people, and, you know, be in different countries, blah 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 blah. Midnight in Paris is really going to make you long for that, so maybe don't watch it. Okay, Before Sunrise, what I often say is the Hollywood version of In the Mood for Love. One of the best written love stories, one of the best acted, one of the best directed. Richard Linklater's filmmaking here is very simple, but delightfully so. Catch Me If You Can. I think this actually has my favorite DiCaprio performance. It also has one of the best movie dads in Christopher Walken. Tom Hanks is obviously great as well. And I think this is one of Spielberg's most playful and most intelligent films. You know, it's one of those scripts that's insanely intelligent and is always like a few steps ahead of you, but is never like superior. It never feels like it's trying to say, I'm smarter than you. It's very endearing, and I think Spielberg's direction really helps with that. You've got Kings of Summer, which is what I like to call sort of the male version of Lady Bird. Both films I absolutely love, and both films I relate to on so many levels. It's so much fun, and it has a great rewatchability factor, and it works very well as a hangout film. Although I think it does take a turn, and it does get a little bit more serious towards the end, but it is always able to maintain that sense of fun, which I think is something we all need right now. And the way that it handles the father-son relationship is very similar to the way Lady Bird handles the mother-daughter relationship, which is damn near perfect and so powerful. Okay, so definitely check out Kings of Summer if you haven't. Now, just like the first category, 4 classics to end it off. Lawrence of Arabia, which I think is sort of the gold standard for adventure epics. David Lean is one of my favorite directors, and this is my favorite film from David Lean. It also has one of the best film scores of all time. And for a film that's about 3 hours and 40 minutes, it goes by really quickly. The same cannot be said, however, for David Lean's other film, Dr. Zhivago. Now, the reason I really wanted to recommend this is because it's an essential film. You know, it's one of those films that anyone who's interested in films, I feel like, needs to watch. But it's very hard to watch. It's very hard to watch. It's incredibly long, and it takes place over, like, decades. And there are a lot of characters, and you see these people go through so much, like, heavy stuff. And it's very depressing, and yet I think it's so powerful. And the direction is brilliant. It feels long, I will say. Going into this film, it's like 3.5 hours or something, and you're gonna feel like it's 3.5 hours. It's a long film, and it's hard to watch. But, you know, if there ever was a time to do it, it's now. So yeah, definitely check out Dr. Zhivago. Next up is To Catch a Thief. Now, when it comes to Alfred Hitchcock directed adventures, I think his collaborations with Cary Grant are a little bit more cool and action-packed, I guess, and sort of thrilling than the James Stewart ones. You know, those ones are a little bit more intimate, you know. And I was going to recommend North by Northwest, but I'm doing a video on North by Northwest that's going to come out in a few weeks. So I decided, you know what, why not recommend To Catch a Thief? This is, in my opinion, Hitchcock's best-looking film. The cinematography by Robert Burks is incredible. It has some of the best uses of the color green. Cary Grant's amazing, and it also has Grace Kelly, who's like magnetic, and she's just brilliant in everything and just mesmerizing. So yeah, To Catch a Thief is pretty good. The Searchers, which is kind of the quintessential Western, sort of before Sergio Leone and Clint Eastwood came onto the scene. John Wayne, John Ford, one of the best director-actor collaborations ever. And this is sort of their magnum opus in many ways. Obviously, it's a very traditional Western, but in a way, I kind of think it's set the benchmark for Western films. It's such a fun adventure. The ending shot and the opening shot, which has become iconic at this point, just brilliant. Just check it out. It's one of those films that if you haven't seen it, just take the time to watch it now, just so you can say, I've seen it. But also, it's a brilliant film. Now, the last 5 just kind of sit awkwardly in the middle. We've got Brigsby Bear, which is really fun and quite well directed, and a sort of a good hour and a half, hour and 40, you know, and I think to any filmmaker is going to be quite inspiring, because to watch a film about people who want to make films but don't know how to make films, and you see them make films, is always entertaining, and it always makes you want to get up and make a film. And I think that's the effect that Brigsby Bear has on me, so definitely check that out. Eyes Wide Shut is up next, which is a bit of a departure from Brigsby. This is actually one of my favorite Kubrick films. I think it's like number 3. And it's very long, okay? And it's very disturbing, and it's very messed up. And I think it's one of those films that you definitely have to watch by yourself. At least the first time, you definitely have to watch it by yourself. And if you want to feel challenged, you know, emotionally, psychologically, definitely check this one out. I've also got A Ghost Story, which is my favorite film from David Lowery, and has one of my favorite Rooney Mara performances. The filmmaking is terrific. It's such a beautifully done film. It's so heartbreaking and so melancholic, and it's a slightly pretentious, but, you know, in a good way. And I think, again, a film that's very fitting in terms of what's going on in the world right now, so definitely check that out. Second last one is Jarhead, by Sam Mendes, shot by Roger Deakins. Jake Gyllenhaal's in it, and no one ever really talks about his performance in this film, even though it's really good. Same with Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx is brilliant. Peter Sarsgaard is brilliant. And I often say it's the best film about nothing happening. So if you think you're going to like something like that, definitely check it out. Now, final film is Ratatouille, because I think this is a fucking masterpiece. It's such a good film, isn't it? Ratatouille is so good. Brad Bird's direction, the score by Michael Giacchino, the soundtrack, the sense of energy, the themes of passion and dedication, and being able to do what you love despite who you are. So good. So good. Oh my god, I'm definitely going to watch Ratatouille now. Yeah, guys, anyway, I hope that list of films was pretty good. I hope that this list it proves useful to you somehow, in some ways, and I hope that I haven't rambled on for too long. Anyway, guys, please stay tuned for quite a few videos. I've got a lot of stuff that I'm working on now coming out. Thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you stay safe, stay healthy, stay home, and thank you.